Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for some more tag time. I thought it was pretty unfair as a demonstration of the Decoart Media Crackle paint the other day when we had a play with them on some of these pegs. If you haven't seen that, I'll link it in the video below. Because I applied it so thinly, it didn't have a chance to crack. So I dived straight back in and applied it in my usual way to an MDF tag here, like so. And yes, if you apply it more thickly and also in varying thicknesses, you get a magnificent crackle out of this, a one-step crackle. So I just thought it was it was only fair to show that it does actually work beautifully as a crackle paint, because you probably didn't get a very good impression of it when we were doing the pegs the other day. So I did this one immediately at that point. So that's had a couple of days now on the mat. I meant to get on with filming straight away and things, yeah, it wasn't possible. So I'm applying with a palette knife. I think when we did the pegs, I probably used a brush and I applied it very thinly. But we are going to be stamping over this crackle. So we were stamping over the peg crackle, and you can see that as I'm applying it, A, it's coming in lots of different thicknesses, and B, in places I'm doing that little patting up and down gesture to create even more texture within that crackle paint, making it different thicknesses in different places. Because I want to stamp over it in the sort of central areas where I'm mostly expecting those stamped images to turn up, I am trying to keep the surface relatively smooth. But around the edges, where that's really not going to matter and I really want something nice and rustic, that's where I'm really going for the textury version. So that, simple as that, I'm going to leave in a safe place to get on with its crackling while we do some stamping over the texture here. How long it takes to do its thing will depend on moisture levels where you live, will depend on the temperature in the room, will depend on all kinds of things. So I can't give you a definitive answer on how long you should leave it. One thing I can tell you is do not heat dry it. If you try to heat set this, it will not work. You can see in terms of colour, I haven't done anything extra to this, but you can see that because it's got those cracks where you see through to the MDF underneath, that's already gone a slightly vintage colour compared to the bright white of this one. So it's, after glorious sunshine for days and days and days, it's gone quite gloomy outside. So I am working with the additional light for this. So apologies if you're getting shadows in the background. But if you don't want to go straight for having that surface underneath showing through, then give it a coat of white paint to start with, and then your crackle obviously is crackling over white, and you'll get less of an impression of sort of vintage brown coming through. I don't mind. I quite like the vintage brown. Sometimes I do a full-on sort of Nordic crackle where I paint it white first, and then anything I put over the top is going to be in charge of what colour goes down in between the crackles. So yeah, that was just to kind of show you, A, Decoart crackle paint does work beautifully as a crackle paint. B, to show you the application of it onto those MDF tags. If you haven't got MDF tags, that's fine. You can go onto a paper tag. But what I probably will do if I'm using paper is I'll glue it to some cardboard, waste cardboard to start with, so that I've got that nice firmness for the crackle to do its thing without the tag completely curling up. So that's that. Let's get on to doing some stamping over this crackle after I've put this out of the way, and you can probably see some of what's in store. Back in a sec. I've set that aside to do its crackle thing, and we're going to have a play with these summer poppies, new in July of 2025, this set. I've stamped all 4 poppy flower heads onto some tracing paper. So it's quite nice tracing paper actually, this. It's not that really horrible skinny crackly stuff. It's got quite a nice texture to it. Stamped all 4 and cut them out so that I've got them to use as masks, so that I can stamp and then stamp again, creating the look of something behind. On the two with the shorter stems, I remembered on one of them to leave its stem a bit longer, because then if I want to fill in extra stem, I didn't remember on this one, but you know, it'll be fine. Haven't quite decided which of these is going to be the major one, but I've got one of each of them, so I can work that as I go. And I think I'm going to stamp in the olive archival. My plan is to put maybe some foliage and some grasses in the background. So grasses, the pressed grasses and the winter grasses are here waiting. We'll see what we get round to. So I'm going to, well, I can use the masks to do a bit of deciding about what flowers I want to have happen. So one of the things I was playing with here was sort of a sense of scale. There are slightly larger stems and slightly smaller stems. So there's a sort of foreground, background thing going on. I think that might be quite nice, mightn't it? There we go. Let's go for approximately that on this one. And of course, we've got another tag crackling in the background. Of course, it's always possible to reverse the mask, so watch out for that. You don't want to get yourself the wrong way round and forget. It won't be stamped that way, it'll be stamped that way. I've stamped these in black so that you can see them. Very unusual for me to stamp in black, as you know. So let's get these in place, and then we can see what's what. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with olive, because I think I'm going to enjoy that greenery as opposed to grey and black and I don't know what all. I'm going to make sure I've got right into all those stamens, because there's quite a lot of density to the sketch right in the middle there, lots of detail going on, so make sure you've got all that. And as far as stamping over Crackle goes, it's very simple. It's like stamping on a non-crackled surface, but you have to live with the fact that there's going to be a degree of imperfection, because obviously the technique is the same for stamping onto a flat surface, but it's not the same as stamping onto a flat surface. We've got texture and crackle and all sorts going on. So yeah, it's not the most pristine stamping you'll ever see, but I think it's worth it to have all that delicious crackle texture behind going on. Let's get this one in place, and then I keep thinking I'm going to stamp with the mask. That's not correct. This one can go on. So we'll stamp here, and yeah, even on these ones with the longer stems, on this one I remember to leave an even longer stem below, so that if I want to stamp it taller, I'll still have that masking going on. And that's exactly what's happening here, but I didn't remember to do it with this flower head. There we go. Firm pressure down, little tiny wiggle. Lovely. Very good. And I think I'm just going to use a pen to extend these two stems right down to the base. And then I'm going to do some masking. So by placing the masks over the top, I'll be able to stamp the foliage as if it's behind them. But first I want to do the pen work. So I need to fetch a pen. Right, let's see. Hopefully there's enough ink left in this nib. It's one of the pens I've used the most, because it does make a good continuation for olive. And this, again, doesn't have to be perfect. I just want that kind of presence of the stalk. Probably gonna, well, I could just paint it with that, couldn't I? That makes it nice and easy. Can you hear? This is not for people who have a problem with, you know, the noise of fingernails down a board or rubbing a balloon. So when you're colouring over Crackle, you will get that crackly noise, because we're going over texture. So I might put a bit of that green round onto this part that's going to become the seed head as well. But I'm planning to do some painting. So, but I could also fill in a couple of those stems. Grand. So with the masking, one of the reasons I think tracing paper is a good thing to cut your masks out of is that you can really see when you're over the right position. You get that kind of moment where everything comes into focus. Also, because it's quite thin paper, I quite often make my masks out of old book pages as well. Because it's very thin paper, you don't get a gap where you stamp. If you use quite thick paper, then the rubber stamp, when I stamp over the top, can't quite make it to the surface right next to the image, so that you'll end up with a kind of outline around it. That can be a really effective thing. It can be a really effective look, because it'll make the image stand out. But if you want something naturalistic, then you really want to be able to stamp as close to the image as possible. I'm gonna hold my breath and hope that will work for me. As I'm picking them up and putting them down, it may be that those masks will move just marginally, but I think I'm prepared to live with that. So I think it's pressed grasses. On these you get a silhouette version and a sort of sketchy version with lots of detail. It could be either of them really, doesn't matter. I'm going to go for the slightly brighter leaf green, I think, for this, and just get a bit of foliage going behind these flowers. So as is usual with me, I'm probably going to stamp this a few times in slightly different positions, so I'll need to keep an eye on putting that mask back in position each time. I think this is going to be quite pretty. Let's see. Hoping so. So with this mask in position, I can just stamp straight over the top. Again, good contact. Create that. And you can see it stamps onto the mask, but when you remove the mask, as if by magic, that grass remains behind the poppy. Very happy with that. I need another bit down here, obviously, across this crackle here, and I'm going to make sure that's in place, because I might just nick the edge of that petal there with the next stamping. Let's pop that across here, I think, maybe straight up, maybe that's the thing. There we go. And again, as I say, and here come the trains. There we go. So that's going behind those petals. Really nice effect. Let's have another one coming up the side, coming up the other side. Let's get you in position. And off he goes. That was a peaceful morning for you. And let's get this one up this side. Again, coming in at a slight angle, I think. Maybe like so. So as you can see, stamping over, the mask went flying as I did that. There we go, foliage behind the poppy seed heads. Oh, that's making me really rather happy, exactly as it is. Do I want to gild the lily and add a little bit more? Maybe we'll use the grasses on the other one, or maybe we will send a grass up through the middle there. Yes, I do want to. I'm playing. This is still very early in having these stamps for me. I haven't had them for very long, so I'm still discovering how I like to combine them with my previous stamps, how I like to work with them. What colour should we put this in? Maybe something like Pebble Beach. So we are thinking about meadowy affairs as opposed to all greenery. Let's go Pebble Beach and see what we get. So again, I've put both masks back into place, because at the moment I don't quite know exactly where this is going to take itself, whether it's going to run across both of them or one of them or not at all. Let's go up through the middle. There we go. This will be subtle. Pebble Beach is a subtle sort of beige, warm grey, really, not beige. Greige, shall we say. So we're getting a sort of meadowy look to that, and I do want a bit more of it to just echo in other places. So I'm going to send probably this edge of it right up here. This is just so I haven't got the exact same arrangement of stems coming over the top here. There we are, nice. And maybe one that's coming up through the bottom here. How could that work best? I do want to get some down there, so let's do that first. A little bit of this. Oh, hang on. Multiple inks open at one time. That's dodgy. So let's get you inked up again. And I'm going for a really sort of wild meadow look here. I'm going to put, ooh, can't decide. I'm going to put you there, the top bit. Nice. And then maybe just, again, a little bit extra coming up this side. So again, trying not to have the exact same stem being the main focus. Is my mask in place? Yes, it is. Coming up the side there. I'm enjoying that quite a lot. I'm now in two minds about what colour to make my poppies. So as I mentioned in the launch video, which if you haven't seen at the moment is still in Linktree if you follow my Linktree, but I'll link to the launch blog post in the video here. Why not? I sort of want a bit of green up here. As I said in that video, I wasn't necessarily thinking purely of bright red field poppies when I was designing these. I was thinking of California poppies and Welsh poppies, which come in all manner of shades of pink and coral and yellows and oranges even. In fact, Welsh poppies are very often yellow and orange. Now I want green for this. Do I want this top bit again? I think it's going to be the easiest bit to get, so I will. Just coming in over the top of this poppy here. Oh, don't fall off. That's unhelpful. Pop you back in place-ish, at least. You back in place-ish, at least. No, you do need to be in place because you're where I'm stamping. Right, firm pressure down into the grid block so it doesn't fall off. Thinking just a little bit coming through here. It really is just the tip of a grass. Again, mostly just to set off that petal there. There we are. That's all looking good to me. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just enjoying that green down there. There we are. Good. Real sort of wild meadow look that's going on here. Anyway, all that stuff I was saying about poppy colour is because at the moment I don't want to get the reds out. I'm not in a red mood today, so I'm not thinking of field poppies. I'm thinking something subtler, gentler. Maybe let's open up the paints. I'm thinking of doing this with watercolour paints. But what I might do is also have a couple of distressed pencils around so that I can add extra detailing using those. So these are my Daniel Smith watercolours. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful paints to work with. And I'm going to need to have a look for a little while to decide, first of all, what colour I want these poppies to be. I think I'm going to aim for quite a cool pinky red. I've yielded to the notion of red because I just think it's going to provide a lovely contrast. I'm working with watercolours partly because they are transparent medium and I want to keep hold of that lovely crackle in the background. I've given a little spritz to some of the pinks and reds here and some of the pinks and reds here, and I think I'm just going to have to start. This is Quin Rose. That I'm just going to put a little bit of colour right to the centre here with that in a few of these petals, and then using a bit of water to just spread that out. That's very pink, isn't it? The Quinacridone colours, so Quin Rose is Quinacridone Rose. The Quin colours are very bold and very bright, and that can be a really lovely thing, or it can be a bit of a shock to the system. I love Anthraquinone red, I think it calls itself, which is also a really deep, cool red. That's quite nice. And what I want to make sure I do is allow some of these petals to be different colours from the petals next to them, so that we really get that sense of different petals in the shade, some of them in the foreground. So this is Quin Lilac. That's giving me a pinker look. Look, that might be where my heart is today. Quin Lilac, who knew? It's not, I have to say, like any lilac tree I've got. I prefer my lilacs in that blue tone over full on pink. I like a purpley blue lilac, in fact a blue lilac. I'm going to put some colour behind here, but I think I might put some green colour behind these central stamens and let that mix to a lovely off brown with what's going on. I do want to get some green going down in this little seed head part, the bit that's going to become the seed head. I can accentuate that stem just a little bit with some paint. That's also activating the pen, which is a watercolour pen, to be honest. It's a watercolour marker. Grand. Let's put another little layer of Quin Lilac into the centre of these. So unlike paper, of course, this is not going to spread in the way that watercolour often spreads through paper, because it gets stuck at a crack. You see what I mean? When it hits a crack, it stops moving. So in order to get the colour to move, you do have to be helping it with the brush. So that's just a little bit of, what was that I put on? Transparent red oxide, which is doing quite a nice thing for me in terms of autumny colours. So one of the things I love about this is being able to keep that lovely crackle texture completely visible. Let's zoom in a little bit for the next stage of this so that you can see what's going on. There we go. So hopefully now you'll get a better look at precisely how this paint moves or doesn't move on the crackle. I'm just lifting out that centre bit a little bit. Look how much colour was coming with that. And if you still can't get the colour off, a little bit of water obviously will lift it. I'm just thinking I want to keep that sense of highlighting in the centre here. Grand. So let's go back in, see if I can remember what order I did this in. I did some Quin Rose first of all, didn't I? So let's have a full-on bit of Quin Rose, and let's maybe put a little bit more Quin Rose back into here now that we've got a sense of what's happening. But you can see, unlike when you apply this to watercolour paper, it travels across some little bits and then it won't travel across the rest. So yes, I can spread it out using a watery brush, but that is me doing the spreading. Whereas if you were applying to watercolour paper, it would be doing some of this spreading by itself. But I'm fine with being in charge of where things go sometimes. One of the things that's good for me about working with watercolour is that I do have to yield a little bit to letting the watercolour go where it wants to go, but it's quite nice for once to be the one in charge of where the watercolour's heading. So that's a bit too much Quin Rose going on in there. So yeah, a little dab with your paper towel will lift off the crackle in the same way as it lifts off watercolour paper. So a little bit of that amazing transparent red oxide just gives us a contrasting kind of a tone that I'm really rather enjoying against the pink. So this is still a journey for me, pink and red, and discovering how I like them to play. For the most part, I like them with a sort of hint of vintage or a hint of muting, and that's what that transparent red oxide is doing for me there. It's giving me that not perfect pink, sort of a slight sense of decayed pink, if you like. And that was one of the things behind these stamps, was these are flowers that are just on the way to going over. They're not at the peak of perfection. They're just heading out into twisty, gnarly movement of the petals of the colour. Any second now these petals are going to drop and the seed head will start to develop. But the poppies really last such a short length of time anyway, certainly the ones we've got in the garden. You get really a day with the blooms and then they're off. So again, I'm going to do some lifting right in the centre here, just because I want to come back to some of those stamens and have a little bit more light right in the middle here. So you can see the paint is lifting off these crackles very, very easily, sort of almost more easily than it does off watercolour paper. That's quite nice. I'm going to take a little bit more transparent red oxide, I think, and then just run it down some of these creases. And the Lilac, same thing. Just taking it down some of these places where petals meet or clash to create a little bit more definition around the edges of the petals. Let's take one down there, let's take one across there, through there, let's get in behind there. So I'm now using the detail of the sketch to be able to apply my colour in more detail, using those creases, grand. And if I want to create little highlights, then again the lifting is a really useful way to do that. So if I lift off the top of this petal here, I need a fresher bit of paper towel to get right in there. I lift off just around the top of here, it will be as though the sun is catching the top of that petal. If I lift off around the edge here, it'll be as though the sun is catching the top of that one. So you can create real sense of light and shade to let these petals dance. Dancing, as you may know, is one of the words that forms a major part of these stamp sets. One set has the word dancing quite large, and one set has dancing in the breeze, little phrase from William Wordsworth's poem about the daffodils. So I'm now using the transparent red oxide to go in and add a bit of detailing to those central stamens, and I like that quite a lot because it's moderating the effect of the pink by giving me some rust. That's quite happy making. Let's see, do I want this bit in here to really not be petal, in which case I need to lift away a little bit of that pink between petals. It's very important, of course, that we stamped in archival ink earlier. You can absolutely stamp in Distress for lots of projects. Distress is a lovely ink to stamp in, but if you want to do anything with wet mediums and preserve your image, then you need to stamp in an archival or permanent ink. Those are looking rather beautiful to me. What I might do is give myself a little bit of hint of the sky coming down, I think. I don't want too much. I don't want to do sort of sky all the way behind everything. Cerulean blue would make sense, wouldn't it? Because cerulean means the sky. So sky, that really ought to be sky blue. I think just a little... And what I love again about this, adding paint to Crackle, is how it will just sit in those sort of cracks and give you a beautiful rustic look to what's going on. I've started doing that and I'm really enjoying the effect, so I'm going to keep going. It's quite a watery mix of cerulean blue, so it's going to stay subtle, and I am starting to feed it down between these stems at the bottom. Some of this pink is not dry yet, so it has picked up a little bit of that pink. I rather like that. It's as though the colour of the petals is dancing off into the sky. I'm not going to go out of my way to encourage it, but I'm not going to worry where it happens. That's rather pretty, I think. Do a little bit of extra blue spatter, maybe with a slightly darker blue in there. Cerulean blue chromium, so it's definitely related. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. And maybe the other thing we want to do is add a little bit of sap green spatter. Let's maybe mix it with the cerulean blue. Yep, there we go. Ah, yes. Just for a sense of real summer profusion. I'm going to allow that to dry and then come back and take a look at whether I want to add any words to our crackled painting. You can see the paint at the moment is still quite fluid, still on the move. And leaving it to dry by itself will allow it to just pool into those crackles and highlight that crackle texture. Right, I'll be back when that's dry. Just be warned, one thing that can happen as you apply watery mediums to a crackle surface is if the water gets in under one of the cracks, you can find that one whole mosaic crack might remove itself, might suddenly start peeling up. I, of course, love that as an additional imperfection, and at times you'll find me deliberately peeling bits up so that I get a nice crackled effect under those things. I'm thinking I want just a little bit more greenery going on into these stamen areas. So this is a mixture of sap green and green gold, just to lighten that sap green a little bit, just to pop that colour in there. The paint is mostly dry, but it's really interesting. It's it will reactivate really easily on these crackles in the way that if you were working on paper, you'd have a little bit more resistance to movement. It would actually be more willing to stay put on paper than it is on these crackles. So just bear that in mind as you're working. So I'm putting a bit more depth of colour into these greens here. I think that's pretty good. And then I think I will go with a little bit more. Oh, I need a wider brush than that. In fact, let's go with this with the terrible spatter brush. That's going to be very like spatter. I am enjoying this blue, so I might intensify some of the blue. What was that? It was cerulean blue, wasn't it? Let's get another. Oh, lots of green on the brush. Do you see that go down? That's not cerulean blue at all. That's because there's loads of sap green still in my brush. And now there's sap green in the paint palette. So I'll just pick that out. Hopefully get some bluer blues. I mean, the blue-green is not unpleasant. I just want to dip some blue a little bit closer to these petals. Just nicely capturing that sense of the summer sky. Down under the flower here. Down under the flower here. Yeah, that's happy making. Maybe down between the petals here. Grand. And yeah, I'm really in two minds about words for this. Very interesting. It's extremely rare for me to work without any words at all. Extremely rare. Just trying to think the last time it happened. No idea. Enjoying the transparent red oxide, so I'm just thinking about adding a little bit more of that in some places where it hasn't really shown up. So that very dense bit of colour there, I can still, with some water, soften very easily. That's really fun to do, actually. It's really fun to do, just to get that colour to move again, almost like magic. How easy it is to change something that's not making you happy. I'm going to lift a little bit more of that lilac away, move some of this lilac around, and I think this petal is one of the ones where I want a little bit more of that sense of rustiness. Yeah, that's better. Rusty through the middle there, a little bit of rusty through here, and again moving that colour. So position the colour and then move the colour, because we've got that ability. Again, I'm going down some of those creases, just intensify some of those creases. And maybe I should stop fiddling. There comes a point where you have to stop fiddling. I think I may be reaching it. But there is something rather just pleasurable about moving colour around in this very gentle, subtle way. I want to take a little bit of colour out again, just to get that sunlit highlight along the edge of the petal. Nice. And let's soften this. So yes, I went down the crease, but it's a bit too much for me now. Again, just to lift, to get some movement. Pretty, 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 pretty. A little bit of inking around the edge, I think. So this time I am going to give it a quick blast with the heat tool and then think about finishing touches. I've zoomed in again a little way so that you can see as I just add. So this is acrylic paint, Fresco finish tinned peas, and I just want to add a little opaque touch of that to the centre of some of these stamens. It's partly giving me a little touch of dimension on those areas, but it's also giving me something that I know will stay put and will contrast. And I'm applying it with a water brush, but I'm not squeezing any water through. It's just that this water brush does have a helpfully fine point to it if you touch it just very lightly to the surface. I hope I'm on camera. I'm looking at what I'm doing rather than checking. I've zoomed in, as I say, so that you can take a look at this. I hope you can see it. There we go. So that's just giving me a little bit of opacity. And this is a semi-transparent, semi-opaque, semi-transparent, same difference, half full, half empty. Glass half full, glass half empty. But it just gives me that extra. There's a bit too much going on here. So again, while it's still wet, I can lift that away, add back the detailing. But I think that's quite nice in terms of a little bit of contrast, and I might use it again to just highlight this. Because the pen I extended that stalk with was a water-soluble one, it has solubilized as I've been adding watery mediums. So that just gives me a chance to refresh that greenery heading down to the bottom of the tag. And at the moment, I don't think I want any words on this. Controversial, eh? What I might do is do a little bit of that as spatter as well. Let's take a look at, yeah, I think that's going to be good. It's just adding that bit of texture, that bit of last minute life and spontaneity, randomness, adds to the movement, adds to the sense of dancing in the breeze, even though they're poppies, not daffodils. Quick little blast with this. And then I might do one final little white spatter for that sense of pollen, all things dancing in the sunlight. I'm enjoying the colour of these poppies quite a lot Interesting, eh? Rust. Rust is the thing that's made me happy. That transparent red oxide is the thing that has kind of given me a sense of joy in those. So this is Archival ink, Distress Archival ink. So ground espresso was one of the colours that came as an archival formulation, a distress colour, but in an archival formulation. And rather than buying the ink pad, because it hadn't come out in a large size at that point, I got myself the re-inker and one of the custom archival ink pads, so a blank ink pad, and inked it up with the archival re-inker so that it gives me ground espresso. Again, watch out for this. If you get a bit too enthusiastic as you ink this, you'll find that bits of crackle start flaking off. For me, that's worth encouraging. And if at any point I want to absolutely fix this, I'll add a coat of matte varnish to make sure no further bits of crackle come off. But at the moment, I'm happy to let it do a little bit of natural flaking. It's very strange. I've got the itch to add words, but I've got another itch that says, don't do it. Can't decide. I'm going to find something to put through the top here. I think it's probably going to be fine twine, and then that might tell me whether I want the words or not. I think it's this. I think it's a little Muse token right at the top here. I'd quite like to highlight that lettering a little bit, but I'm unsure at the moment of the best way to achieve that, to get the colour I want. So I've got one here that I don't really mind if something terrible happens to it. So one thought is to use Distress Crayon, which you can just rub over the top. That gets me quite a good little highlight of that. This is Speckled Egg, just around those raised areas. Excellence, that one says, which I sort of can't really see myself using. Feels like showing off. I don't know. Nice thin coat of the tinned peas here, which I'm just going to experiment with placing that down into, almost as though I'm inking up a stamp. And that gets me, ooh, I quite like that. That gets me just a little green highlight. So the one I'm sort of interested in using is Journey, which is the silvery colour as opposed to the dark bronze or gold, is that? Anyway, very dark one versus a slightly paler one. I think I just want a little touch of the green that we've been using. I think is going to be a nice thing to just echo with if I can get it to happen. Yeah, so that's giving me, again, I don't know if it's focusing. Look at those painty fingers. Always the sign of a good time. Don't want that little bit down there. Let's just clear that out. And spread this paint out again. Still plenty to use. And then my plan is just to hook it through the twine. Oh, that's good. That's got it. That's what I'm after. Grand. So I will clear up here before we dive in for a little bit of a close-up. Thank you, as always, for your company on these Tag Tuesdays. I did grab, we've been here about, what, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour tops. And there are places where this other tag is starting to crackle, so that'll be ready for a future tag time journey. I might need to create a partner tag, either with some more poppies or with some of the new cone flowers. We'll see what that ends up being. But I will, as always, list anything that seems useful to list down below, ingredients, videos to link to. Do leave any comments or questions, and thank you, as always, for your company on this creative journey. Hang around for the close-up, and happy crafting all.